Hello, I'm Tim West, Director of Threat Intel and Outreach at WithSecure, and I'm here to talk to you about mass exploitation, the vulnerable edge of business security. Why am I talking about this? Well, really, 2024 has been pretty dominated in operational cybersecurity by mass exploitation campaigns. It's been taking up an awful lot of our time in WithSecure and in our industrial partners. It's been really dominated by these kind of campaigns, and it's not just our anecdotal perspective. The statistics say the same. So of all of our incident response cases over 2024, 50% of them, a full half of our incident response cases, started from compromising of an internet routable vulnerability. There's been a decline in malicious email attachments from 2022, pretty consistency. There is, of course, some seasonal variation there. But what we're looking at is a kind of more capable defensive posture against attachments in emails. They've moved into things like links and LNK files and other kind of formats, and exploiting vulnerable services. Other research backs this up. I'm not going to go through all of the bullet points for you, but you can see that, time and time again, exploitation of edge services is being kind of cited as the most common and frequent initial access vector for threat actors into a network. The most important point that I want to kind of highlight is the bottom bullet point research from BitSight, which kind of shows that over a third of organizations that they saw hosted a KEV CVE. I'll talk about what a KEV CVE means in a minute. But that means remediation time is looking at 175 days. That's 6 months. Now, KEV CVEs are really important because this shows the vulnerabilities that are actively under compromise from threat actors. So CISA's KEV, the known exploited vulnerability database. CISA is the critical infrastructure and security agency of the US, and they maintain the authoritative list of all of the vulnerabilities that are under compromise in the world, really. And this forms the basis of our investigation because we are really looking at where the attackers are to. So what do I mean when I say edge devices? It's a piece of software, it's a service that's accessible from both internal to your network and external from the internet. It's a major part of the attack surface, and it's often less monitored. It's not uncommon not to find EDR solutions or EPP solutions on these edge services. I say they often have valuable data, such as credentials. They almost always have valuable data, such as credentials, sensitive files, and they're an ideal place for a foothold into the core network. And these are exploited per month. This is the data taken from KEV's CVE list. These are all of the edge services that we found being exploited from pretty much today back to 2022. As you can see, the numbers in 2022 are relatively low. So on average, and again, there's some seasonal variance around Christmas time of each year. The numbers go low. And at the start of this year, as you can see, a major spike, 10 edge vulnerability campaigns. But numbers have really almost doubled on average. That's quite massive over the last couple of years. And one thing I really want to draw your attention to is this is not a cumulative graph, right? This is almost the rate of acceleration in vulnerabilities being exploited. A new mass exploitation campaign for a new vulnerability hitting KEV in May is counted as one. However, we could still have mass exploitation campaigns from vulnerabilities that hit KEV previously. So this is almost the rate of acceleration of vulnerabilities that are being exploited. And when I say almost, I mean that's because vulnerabilities are also being patched away. So it's that constant battle between, or constant race, I should say, between getting these vulnerabilities and edge services patched versus the attackers trying to exploit them. And the numbers aren't looking really good. Comparing that to 2023, the graph on the left shows the count of the month. The left bars can show that maybe in 2024, on average, they're slightly higher. We're not all the way through the year yet, so we can call that relative parity. However, when you compare edge vulnerabilities that are being compromised to everything else that's being compromised, it's disproportionately way higher. There are a lot less vulnerabilities in 2024 that are being compromised that aren't on the edge and aren't as part of infrastructure. The baseline score, so this will show kind of the severity of a vulnerability. This is the graph on the right. We're roughly equal as well, maybe slightly higher. Now that's edge devices, and when you kind of consider edge devices, think possibly remote management software or file transfer appliances. Infrastructure devices slightly different, but equally important. So this is the devices that come as they are in a kind of black box format from a vendor. Think your firewalls, think your internet, your network infrastructure, this kind of thing. These are completely supplier defined. They can potentially be customized, within set parameters. But ultimately, the hardware and the software are set at the vendor. They often have proprietary operating systems, for example. And this is a problem because when it comes to compromise of these, and you might want to perform a forensic investigation, you can't always access the file system really easily. So it gives a bit of a blind spot for defenders too. Again, the numbers of them being exploited per month is rising. So relatively flat in 2022. That started to take off over the last year or so, over the last 12 months. Again, seasonal variances. Again, huge spike in the start of this year when I said, kind of anecdotally, the 2024 landscape has been dominated to operational teams by infrastructure and edge service exploitation. This data backs that up. And numbers have kind of, on average, tripled there. And the same caveats apply. This is almost the rate of acceleration, not necessarily just the number of campaigns that we see. Again, versus 2023, slightly higher in terms of numbers, but rough parity because we're not all the way through the year yet. But again, the count in comparison to other vulnerabilities being exploited is really high. So these vulnerabilities, edge and infrastructure, are being exploited with a much greater proportion to anything else on Kev. And again, the base score, the severity of these vulnerabilities is increasing, albeit a small amount. Just to kind of give you guys a sense of the frequency that these come in. So base score, relatively consistent in average, but what you can actually see is a huge clump. They're coming thicker and faster over the last 12 months than the preceding 12 months, where it was not uncommon to have a couple of months without a mass exploitation campaign against infrastructure. Now it's uncommon to have a month without one, or 2 or 10. Some case studies. And this is real-world stuff that we've actioned and responded to as part of WithSecure products and services teams. Enterprise VPN in 2024. And again, what I want to kind of bring your attention to is the iceberg. This is just campaigns exploited using 2024, so new CVEs. There are still mass exploitation campaigns using older CVEs. That's out of scope for this slide. But in January, Connect Secure VPN and NetScaler, 55,000 hosts online. Connect Secure again in February, another 25,000 roughly. In March, 40OS, 150,000, the numbers come up. In April, Adaptive Security Appliance, Cisco, and PanOS, 162,700 and 150,000 hosts. It's obviously an estimate, however, but that does indicate to us that there are tens of thousands of organizations exposed across all kinds of sizes to enterprise VPN software. And when I say enterprise VPN, I don't necessarily mean you to be an enterprise-sized organization. Remote management software. In February this year, a critical and a high severity vulnerability was released in Screen Connect. It was exploited within days of the notification. About 8,200 services were exposed to the internet. Each one could, in theory, manage up to 150,000 clients across organizations. These are used by MSPs. It was exploited en masse, internet-wide, indiscriminately, over a week before the patch rate hit 50%. WithSecure managed to respond to one of these, and we track an actor. And this actor, we could tell, was moving from mass exploitation event to mass exploitation event from mass exploitation event. That was their job. That was their focus. They were initial access broker, compromising edge and infrastructure services on an industrial scale. Managed file transfer. So actually, apart from Lockbit's postings this month, the busiest single month for a ransomware actor was Clop in the summer of last year, because they compromised MoveIt, a managed file transfer appliance. A secure file transfer appliance, forgive me. And they compromised this en masse at scale, to the point where they had too much data. They didn't know how to handle the success that they had. Again, WithSecure responded to one of these, and we came across an attacker-controlled device scanning the internet indiscriminately, specifically for managed file transfer appliances. This is an edge service. This is something that you can access from inside and outside your network. It almost always has really sensitive data. It provides a really good level of return for threat actors. And again, this demonstrates there are actors specifically looking to target specific types of edge systems. That's their job. That's what they do. So, key points. The number of edge services and infrastructure vulnerabilities that are being exploited is rising. The number of everything else is falling. The time to patch out a CVE takes far longer than the time it takes a threat actor to exploit it at scale. And these infrastructure and edge vulnerabilities are being actively sought out. There is a real dedicated ecosystem of criminals looking to compromise these and monetize that access. So knowledge of your attack surface is critical. You can't realistically prevent a zero-day from being exploited. So really what you can do is put yourself in a position where you're able to respond effectively when that happens. And that means understanding the attack path and being able to respond quickly, understanding what your attack surface looks like. Thanks very much. I don't think we've got time for questions, but I'll be hanging out over on the side of the screen if you want to kind of discuss anything more. Happy to.
Thank you, Tim. And maybe also good to mention, if people want to hear more from you, they can also listen to the new Exposed podcast. We launched a new podcast. I think it's available on all streaming platforms.
It's on Spotify at least.
Yeah. So check it out. And if you want to ask questions, please go to the With Intelligence booth. Next up, thank you. Next up is a really exciting introduction about AI. I think this is really exciting, and for this presentation, I want to ask Klaas and Leszek to join me on stage. Please welcome them.